This is Open Parley Live. This is Open Parley Live.
Hello and a warm welcome to Open Parley Live here on Open Parley. My name is Lynette Manzini. Thank you very much for joining us. On the 23rd of August, 2023, Zimbabwe held harmonized elections. 10 presidential candidates participated in that election. Two frontrunners, ZANU-PF, Emmerson Mnangagwa, Nelson Chamisa from the Triple C. According to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, Emmerson Mnangagwa won by 52.6%, and Nelson Chamisa from the Triple C won by 44%. 9 months after this election, Chamisa has an ongoing contestation. He's disputing the results. On the 27th of May, 2024, he held a press conference after he had been quiet for some time when he quit his party in January. In today's conversation, we want to talk about some of the issues that he raised during this press conference, which is his engagement with SADC, where he was also urging the citizens to take action. What action can the citizens take? What role does SADC play in disputed elections in Zimbabwe? What does this mean about his leadership as the opposition? Joining me online to discuss this issue is Dr. Tadini Masaya. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you, Lynette? Thank you very much for having me, and how are you to the viewers and the team?
Thank you very much. And also joining us is Chenai Mutambasere. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Lynette. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you, Dr. Tadini, as well. I am having a little bit of technical issues with my camera, but hopefully I should be able to sort that out soon.
We are the only people who can have problems in Africa, Chenai. You are not allowed to have these problems.
I could be having a hangover because I've just returned from South Africa, so my device might just have caught the bug. So just bear with me.
Okay, that's fine. So I want to start with you, Chenai. Nelson Chamisa held a press conference on the 27th. Remember, it was after this was the first appearance, his public press conference after he quit the party earlier in the year. And he keeps talking about his engagement. He engaged SADC on numerous occasions. The reason I'm asking this is there are people who are currently assuming that we will have elections in June. We're already in but we haven't had anything from ZEC. Do you think that SADC, was a good strategy approaching SADC?
Okay, so I think that's a very loaded statement, Lynette, which I will try to break down in my response. So, did we have disputed elections on the 23rd of August? Resoundingly, yes, we did. This was confirmed by SADC, by other international and local observers. So, the second thing I want to really reiterate here, that it is not Chamisa going to SADC. It is SADC who declared upon their own observations and within their remit to do so, that this was not a credible election. They went on further to table the matter as an agenda item at the last, I believe, SADC, the last kind of business as usual meeting, I'll call it that, with SADC. They also then, when Nelson Chamisa highlighted to them their observations, etc., in a letter following the election, responded to him saying, this is a matter that we are concerned with, we have tabled it, and we will respond. So this thing of, is it Nelson Chamisa chasing after SADC? I think we need to make that correction quite early on in this discussion, that this is a SADC process. SADC have invited themselves to the table. And what Nelson Chamisa was highlighting at the press conference is, we want to know, you have said this is what you're doing and that you will come back to us. We know that it is within their gifting to make some address. We've seen SADC involvement across the region on matters of electoral disputes. So this is not something that is being invented today by President Nelson Chamisa. This is something that exists and is available to us as a member state within the SADC. Now, in terms of, you also mentioned, will there be elections in June? Will there be elections? There are a lot of things, Lynette, that precede that question. If we say that ZEC suddenly wakes up tomorrow, which they're capable of, and say there's an election, that election cannot go ahead on the basis that the what was highlighted by the 23rd of August, the reforms required have not yet been put in place. So, we cannot say, let's walk into another election next week in June, in July, in the absence of the issues that SADC have highlighted being resolved.
Okay, thank you very much for that. If I can rope in Dr. Tadini, your analysis in respect to the SADC situation, because on numerous occasions we heard members of the Triple C saying that they have approached SADC. Yes, SADC announced that in their report that the elections were not free and fair. There were a lot of irregularities, but we also heard on numerous occasions that they were approaching SADC. Was this strategy effective? Not effective. Was this the correct strategy?
All right, yeah, and thank you for beginning with setting the record straight. I think we have to be true to the history. The history is that they did claim that they approached SADC and not vice versa. So there is actual admittance from those leaders saying that they approached SADC, and what they presented to SADC was that we need to have the election issue in Zimbabwe resolved. Former president of the CCC, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, also made that same assertion in his most recent public statement, where he says that he has been approaching SADC and they have been working out a remedy, or at least he's hoping that they will come back after they had approached them, and they'll come back to say, okay, after you spoke to us, this is what we can do. He made that clear in his statement. Now, and we also have to be honest to the fact that people were told that SADC is the salvation, and that SADC is going to come and somehow intervene in our case and be able to resolve the dispute. And I think people have to own up. I think one of the most famous things before the former president resigned was that he then came back later on and told people that they were SADC. And that's up for interpretation what he meant by that. But it was a follow through to some of the promises and the statements that had come from him and his team to say that SADC was going to come in and SADC was going to give what the people expected. And I remember back then when we were having conversations around SADC, I made it clear that we have to remember that SADC has no power unto itself that is outside what it gets from its member states. And the member states had already declared for ZANU-PF. At least the critical member states had declared for ZANU-PF. While President Hichilema Hakainde seemed to suggest that the election has to be totally ignored, we have to remember that President Cyril Ramaphosa had come in and they endorsed the election. We have to remember that the Tanzanian president had come in and endorsed the election, and many other people had congratulated His Excellency, out of respect of the office, Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa. So at that point, we should have already told the people that there is no way that if these critical states within SADC have already declared, then SADC cannot be the solution, because SADC as a body does not have power outside what it derives from its member states. And that has to be clear. The other thing that I wanted to touch on the issue of SADC is that we have to also remember that SADC was used as a pacifier. The people of Zimbabwe could have had a means that is internal for them to resolve their problem. However, what happened is that they had all their hopes hinged on SADC coming in to do something on their behalf. What I term the savior syndrome that has been perpetuated by our leaders for a long time. That every time our people are stayed and their anger is stayed or their desire to act is stayed under a promise that there is a savior who will intervene on our behalf and deliver for us and to us the desired outcome. So this is a long-winded way of saying the SADC part was always challenged because all these other political analysts and other political participants might say that SADC behaved and gave a different outcome in 2023 in their report. That is not true. You simply need to read the report of 2023, specifically the recommendation section. When you go to the recommendation sections of what the SADC mission recommended, you will notice that they didn't bother to waste their time writing out recommendations. They simply put in a reference. They said, go back to this to the recommendations that we gave you in 2018, and then adopt those. Then to the 2018 recommendations, they only added two more recommendations, which were to address the issue of the delayed ballot and the lack of involvement of the stakeholders in generating, for instance, the ballot papers and all the materials needed for the election. So we have to be honest to that fact also. The only thing that was maybe unique in this particular case was the fact that we had an observer head who had the guts to tell straight off the Zimbabwean government that this is what our recommendation says and this is what we said in 2017, straight to their face, verbatim, as opposed to maybe in 2018 where they just chose to hide it in the papers. That is the only
I'm
difference.
sure.
But thank you.
I'm sure that really got a lot of people excited. But let's bring in Chenai. Chenai, Dr. Tadini says that SADC was used as a pacifier. What are your thoughts to those assertions?
I think the good doctor made a lot of assertions that it would be we must address really. So by virtue, he seems to suggest that from the blue, triple C leaders approach SADC. Yeah. And I think this is where that is the fundamental difference in what I am saying. If you consider process, you and I, Lynette, today, we cannot approach SADC, as it were. There has to be a basis to our approach and a trigger to that approach. And the first trigger for us, insofar as 23rd of August election, was the resounding observations noted by SADC. And also with that, that comes, there are other treaties within SADC that come into play, right? Because Zimbabwe is a member state of the SADC, it's not it's not a playground play group. Yeah, this SADC has got its treaties. It requests its members to uphold the principles of democracy, rule of law, human rights. It has principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. So therefore, if by their own admission and public thereof, as has been mentioned by Dr. Tadini, they have said that Zimbabwe, as a member state, inherently did not uphold these principles and guidelines. Therefore, that provides us with recourse to approach SADC. You've got to understand this context. It's not coming out of the blue nje, they approach SADC. Yeah? So this is why when I say that SADC invites themselves to the party, They invite themselves as a key participant and interested party in how elections and how democracy is upheld by its member states, of which Zimbabwe is one.
Mm.
Once we understand and establish that, we also need to look at how does SADC interact with situations and countries where the democratic principles, as they highlighted in their report, have not been upheld or do not align to the SADC treaty. We have several examples, Lynette. You go to Madagascar in 2009, you go to Zimbabwe in 2008, you go to Lesotho, you've got situations where SADC has done, the process has been observation, dialogue, and in some instances, sanction and interjection. So it's actually it's quite.
Chennai, if I can just interrupt you, when does this dialogue and intervention come
Thank
in?
you.
Does it come in
Yes.
after inauguration, 9 months after the president has been, or has been inaugurated? The MPs are already in parliament. When? What is the time frame in some of these cases?
Well, I mean, this is where I think perhaps the weakness of SADC treaties. There is no defined process that says we are on A, now we are A to B takes 2 months, B to C takes 3 months. Zimbabwe, within its sovereignty, can continue to do things that are aligned to its own sovereign principles. But what we are saying here is there is a SADC process, and that process is subjected to SADC member states meeting, discussing, and having resolve. As you know, we've had two important elections since our August elections that would interrupt and affect the processes, right? We had the elections in DRC shortly after the Zimbabwe elections, of which DRC was also I can't remember whether it's an outgoing or a present member of the Troika that looks at elections. We had the same with South Africa, right? And these are things that are happening and ongoing. So you cannot say that stop everything and do things one, two, three, four. What President Chamisa has done as an advocate of the people of Zimbabwe, as somebody who has been put in this position by the people of Zimbabwe, is to say, hang on a minute, guys. One, we know it is in your gifting to do so. Two, we have had a discussion with you and you have said you are going to come back to us. Would like to know where this is up to. And three, you invited yourselves to the party following your own observations and the misalignment of what happened in Zimbabwe on the 23rd of August and what has been happening since in Zimbabwe, right? So elections in this process have been a trigger for this process. They are not the be all and end all. Other things, you go to Lesotho, the trigger was political instability. You go to Madagascar, the trigger was a coup. Is different triggers, right? Horses for courses. And because we are dealing with sovereign states, I'm not saying, and don't get me wrong in saying that the SADC processes are perfect. I am not saying that the SADC processes will necessarily 100% deliver what is required from them. Not so much required, but an expectation that they ought to meet. But I am saying that this is what is on the table. This is one. I don't remember from Nelson Chamisa's presentation, him actually saying this is the be all and end all. He said, insofar as engagement with SADC, it is important for him to come back to the people to say, this is where I've got up to with that. These are the discussions and responses I've had so far. And this is what I have done to follow that through. And that is what that press conference was about. The other thing that Dr. Tadini mentioned to say that, I mean, he's almost kind of watering down the SADC report. When you look at the SADC report, like I said, SADC member states are bound by a treaty. You are a member. That means you have signed up to something. And they highlighted issues to do with the electoral environment, electoral administration. They talked about ZEC. They talked about the legal framework governing elections. They talked about media freedom. They talked about post-election disputes. These are things that have been tabled by SADC with regards to the situation in Zimbabwe. So we shouldn't let, and for me, he also mentioned that President Chamisa came back and said to the people, you are SADC, right? And what that says is, Zimbabwe is a member state. It's not Mnangagwa who is a member of SADC. It is
Okay,
Zimbabwe that is a member
I,
state.
I, I,
And
I
it
hear
is
you. I,
Zimbabwe that draws on
I hear you,
recourse.
Chenai. I hear you,
Thank you.
Chenai, but allow us, because unfortunately we are already 20 minutes into our conversation,
Sorry.
and
Yeah.
but it's fine. I wish we had more time, but I want to bring in Dr. Tadini and just maybe move forward a little bit and say, do you think that maybe the opposition or Nelson Chamisa should have used internal remedies? Because with SADC, as we have seen right now, it's taking too long. Should he have filed a petition? Because, I mean, the Electoral Act provides for that. Do you think that could have been a better strategy?
Yeah, the very first thing is I have to just a short response. When you acknowledge that there has not been a change in what SADC has been saying since 2018 to now 2023, to the point that they had to recycle their recommendations and simply put in a statement that go back to what we said in 2018, it doesn't mean that you are watering down anything. It simply means that you're acknowledging that the problem is continuing and is persistent, and that the body is aware of how the problem is continuing, and is showing you that we have highlighted these things before, and your problem continues to persist. In that, there is no watering down. There's simply an admittance that there has been misinformation when people say this is the first time that SADC highlighted the crisis of Zimbabwe. It is only the first time that we have had a head of mission who is willing to go the full length and say it outright and not hide behind paper. There's no watering down in that. It is clear, if there's anything that we agree today on this platform with my sister, it is that there is a crisis in Zimbabwe, and the crisis has continued for a very long time. Now, coming to what you said, Lynette, I apologies for taking us back. But now, continuing, was it the best strategy? Should Nelson Chamisa have done that? Advocate Nelson Chamisa should have done what he did, because that is who he is. And what he did is what was best for him. However, is it what I would have advised and what I would have done? No. And this is what I highlighted before. This issue of the savior mentality has held Zimbabweans from taking their own destiny into their own hands. Whenever you have an approach where you say, at this moment, these are the grievances that we have, but we are going to wait upon a entity X to make its move. You have limited your choices. You have limited your options. You have limited your means to freedom or salvation. That is what you have done. You see, the Zimbabwean people, even when you look at the 2008 issue and the involvement of SADC, after the 2008 election, you have to notice that the Zimbabwean people were doing something internally that called and allowed the SADC to then get involved. The Zimbabwean people were on their feet. The Zimbabwean people were demonstrating.
Allow me to interrupt you. What can the Zimbabwean people do now? Or what could they have done initially? Because you continue to talk about the savior mentality and you're saying it's not the right approach. What can the people of Zimbabwe do? Because we also want to look at the solutions. I think even during this press conference, Chamisa even spoke about the citizens taking action.
The very first thing is that the leaders should stop to be perpetuators of oppression. The leaders that talk of change in opposition and limit the rights of the Zimbabwean people. They have been the ones that have stayed people from accessing one of the most fundamental rights that we have in the Constitution, which is the right to demonstrate, which is the right to be heard and to show that you are unhappy.
Are you blaming the opposition for this? Dr. Tadini, are you blaming the opposition for this?
Allow me to continue. Then you will understand where I'm going. If you read the pedagogy of the oppressed, it says the oppressor is the most it's the pedagogy of the oppressed. It says the most effective tool of the oppressor is an oppressed person who has internalized the oppressor's message, and now preaches the oppressor's message. When you have leaders saying you will be arrested if you demonstrate, when you have leaders saying we should stay from this because it is unsafe, yet it is our right, they have become part of the machinery. They have become part of the problem. They have become preachers of the oppressed without even knowing it, that they are preaching on behalf of the oppressor. That is what is happening in Zimbabwe. The main proponents of saying do not access your rights at this moment, especially the right to demonstrate, the right to be heard, the right to protest, are the leaders in opposition. Not specifically which one. You can pick, you can hear them say it, that you know what, if you do this, you'll be arrested. If you
Just to
do
say,
this, you'll
I
be
have a
killed.
hard stop.
So allow me to get to my point. That is a cross that is on the shoulder of opposition, including myself as opposition. And this is why my messaging has changed, that we have to use all our arms or we will lose them. And it is our right to demonstrate the same way that we did in 2008, so as to facilitate and twist ZANU PF to come to a negotiation. You cannot have a calm water and then try and paint a picture to SADC to say that the things are not calm when everyone is relaxed. That's the first thing. Then, am I blaming opposition for the oppression? No, I am blaming opposition, myself included, for being participants in perpetuating the message of the oppressor, as I've demonstrated. However, the beating of people when it comes to people expressing or accessing their rights is solely the responsibility of ZANU PF. The shooting of people when they access their rights is solely the responsibility of ZANU PF. But that should not stop us from continuing to pursue our rights and to seek to expand them. That should not stop us. And we shouldn't be preaching the message that if we do this, then this is going to be the outcome. Yes, please go ahead.
Chenai, Dr. Tadini says that the opposition are limiting the rights of Zimbabweans. For instance, the right to protest. And I remember when, the 45-degree angle gunfire, that ensued in the CBD, people being shot in the CBD. When that happened, it brought shivers down everybody's spines. And what are your thoughts? Do you think it's the opposition, or people also know that it's dangerous?
It's a very interesting assertion there by Dr. Tadini. So, us as Zimbabweans, myself as an individual, we have rights as enshrined in our constitution. Some of those rights include the right to organize and to protest and stuff like this. This is a right I have, you have, Lynette, Dr. Tadini has. It is not bestowed upon us by any one individual, whether in opposition or in ZANU PF. It is a choice that we make. And there have been some Zimbabweans, citizens, who have been brave enough to do so. And really, those gains, we might look at it and think, okay, we had the 1st of August, 2018, where people were killed in broad daylight. Was that a gain? What did we achieve from that? What happened next? We look at the same on 16 January. We've looked at the abduction of activists, Itai Zamara, etc., and so on and so forth. So therefore, we, the people, we make choices given the information that we know. That's the first thing. The second thing, I personally don't recall specifically somebody saying, everybody sit at home and don't protest. This is a choice that we make. When we then look at the Zimbabwe situation, we have had shall I say, 1.5 episodes of reprieve. The first was in 2008, 2009, when SADC was involved and they facilitated dialogue that resulted in the GNU. And that gave us some stability, a period of stability, both politically and economically. We then come to 2017. This was, widespread demonstration that resulted in a change of regime through a coup. And again, having that, did it achieve for us the freedom that we so badly needed, that we marched out for? It didn't. But we did go out, we had a demonstration. What am I trying to say? There are many arsenals in the fight for freedom. The Liberation Party, they did theirs in the late 70s, and they achieved what they achieved. There are so many arsenals. Currently, according to President Nelson Chamisa, as a candidate of 23rd August, he is following through a process that not only is it, he's not plucking it out of thin air. This is a process that us as Zimbabweans were entitled to see through to the end. Is it the only way? I don't believe he has said so. I don't believe that there's anything that stops you and I in our rights as Zimbabwean citizens to do what we can and what we feel necessary to achieve the freedom that we all deserve. So I think this is, I'm trying to understand the paradox that Dr. Tadini places when he says that it's down to opposition leaders. It's down. No, we're talking about freedoms and constitutional choices that we are allowed to do as Zimbabweans. There's nothing that stops you, Dr. Tadini, if that is your way that you're saying it should work, to mobilize and to get it done. And we would all be the happier for it. But to stand and say that there's
Okay.
one person standing in your way, I think is
Unfortunately,
very unfair, and also untrue.
okay, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I want Dr. Tadini to come in. Please don't respond to Chenai, but respond to my question and say, do you think that Nelson Chamisa should continue to pursue this issue, the elections? He's disputing these elections. Should he continue on this path, or is this issue done and dusted? Has this, ship sailed? What are your thoughts?
Uh, these are my thoughts. The Zimbabwean people, or at least a significant portion of the Zimbabwean people, agree that the election was not free and fair, and that every result that came from it is now and void. And it would be of immense help if everyone who holds that position was to participate continuously and relentlessly in ensuring that we get that issue resolved. And if possible, we can even go back to a new election. And if Advocate Nelson Chapisa is of the same disposition as myself and the other millions of Zimbabweans that say the elections were null and void, then he should continue on the path. However, he remains an individual worse off now that he has stepped out of an institution and has his own rights. He should do zvinoenderana naye ndiye. But my cry would be his hand, the same way as
Thank
your hand is needed in this fight. He should keep it there, and we should continue to pursue a resolution that works for Zimbabweans.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. And I like the fact that you're saying everybody should put, we need all hands on deck. And I want to come to you, Chenai, as we're closing. What should the people of Zimbabwe do? Because even here, Dr. Tadini is suggesting that we need all hands on deck. But yes, Nelson Chamisa is still pursuing this issue, pursuing SADC. But what is it that the ordinary person, you and I, can do in the meantime?
Like I said, we are governed by the laws that are enshrined in our constitution that say that you and I have rights. We have rights to protest. We have rights to recourse, and we need to do this. At the moment, we are fighting multiple wars, not just the legitimacy crisis. In fact, the legitimacy crisis has triggered multiple wars, one of which even is propaganda. We are being entertained by things that matter very little. The fact of the matter is, as long as we have not been able to find resolve for us to host credible elections in Zimbabwe. We will continue to go around this mountain and not achieve very much. From that point, let the Dr. Tadinis, let the Chenais, the Lynettes that are so concerned about this situation, let them congregate, let them put heads together. Because, like I said, there are many arsenals to this fight. The SADC one is one. It's a valid approach. We must absolutely continue to pursue, persist, and demand, because we are the member states, not Mnangagwa. It's Zimbabweans that are the members of SADC. So we need to continue. We need to find each other. I like the last thing that Dr. Tadini said, which is, here is someone on the front line of trying to do something about it, and that is Advocate Nelson Chamisa. We also, the front line is a long line. We all can play a part. We all have a hand in this. We need to choose our battles and really stay focused, because unless we resolve legitimacy in Zimbabwe, we will continue to go around this mountain over and over again.
Okay, on that note, I'd like to thank you very much, Chenai, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tadini, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but we will come back to this issue on during another episode, and even talk about the issue of fear, because people talk about our rights. Are we able to exercise our rights? How comfortable are we about exercising our rights, even the right to demonstrate in Zimbabwe? So there you have it, viewers. That's all for today. And in Chenai's words, she says that the front line is a long line. So everybody has a role to play. What role are you playing in this struggle? Until next time, my name is Lynette Manzini. Goodbye.